Welcome to Claris AI. I am Matt Navarre.
And I'm Cris Ippolite. Hey, Matt.
Good to see you. Today we have some good stuff on our agenda. So the Apple WWDC was
Woo.
last week, I guess. I was at the .fmp
Yeah.
conference just before that in Berlin. We were going to talk about Claristotle. hmm
Yeah. Exciting.
I
Excited about
know.
Claristotle.
Yeah, that's the learning initiative. And then
And
each of
you've got
us,
something
I
coming
do.
out, don't
I
you?
have something. Well, it's something in development. I would say pretty early development. And we'll talk about that. And then you have something to talk about as well, which will
Yep.
be involved in some screen sharing. So, people, that's what's coming up.
Yes, sir.
Or person. I don't
So
know. I'm not sure.
I think it
Mom.
might be person. Moms. Yeah. At least we have two people
Yeah,
listening. But
actually,
yeah, this will be a
my
good one
mom
to
passed
check out.
away. So
Oh,
she's watching from
wow.
heaven.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Hope,
Well,
hope there's good reception.
oh my goodness. Well, Starlink actually reaches out
Oh,
there, actually. So yeah,
yeah.
that's good
Let's
news.
just move on.
Please.
So,
So,
WWDC, what's your take?
well, so I'll admit, well, you and I talked a ton about it.
Before.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And
hmm
I'd been paying a lot of attention to what I thought was going to happen, and I found myself about 50 minutes into the now just to be clear that the presentation that I'm alluding to right now was the 10 a.m. Pacific one that was their pre-recorded, just looks like every other product
Yeah.
launch ever. And I had to remind myself, and I think we should all remind ourselves that Apple is essentially a B2C company. They're a consumer, they cater to consumers. Like when we watch
Yeah.
Google's announcements or Microsoft's announcements or OpenAI, like
Yeah.
they're catering to businesses and they're trying to find business use cases, right? I had to remind myself 50 minutes in that like, then we're talking about Jamojis and
Yeah.
just silly things.
Yeah.
That actually is their market. And so I if I was being totally honest with you, I was taking notes and I was saying to myself, like, did they miss again? Right? That was my initial thought. What was yours originally? Because that's just a tease. I'm not going
Well,
to
I
leave it
guess I
there.
kind of knew about that part, but what really surprised me is that they have the fastest iPad they've ever made shipping now. That's
Oh,
always that's always the part of those things. The
I
fastest,
frankly
yeah,
missed it
yeah,
completely. But
yeah. It's just always, of course, the new version is always faster than the old one, but anyway. And
well,
I think
yeah. I mean,
the thinnest, anyway, it doesn't matter. So yeah, the first part was like hardware, software, stuff. And then second part.
yeah. Well, so then after the stock essentially dropped almost 3% overnight, and everyone was completely underwhelmed by what they had seen. My notes for our discussion essentially said, and I'll admit I put something on our Slack channel that we used to coordinate this that essentially said, "There's nothing to talk about. Let's find something else." I quickly edited that the next day because the presentation that people should in fact check out was the State of the Union, and that's when they talked about how all this is actually working. So we're referring to the Apple Intelligence, and there's a
hmm
lot to unpack here, but I think if we focus first on probably the most profound part of it was, well, first of all, let me just spoil it. The big thing that I think made the stock drop, and then of course it skyrocketed the next day. So congrats for everybody that bought the dip. But the thing that underwhelmed everybody was that they said, "Oh, Apple doesn't have their own models, right?" Like this was their big chance to say, "Well, yeah, we've got one too." Um, they do. They actually have two of their own proprietary foundation models, and we'll go into that here in just a moment. But that's a bit of a spoiler. Like people
Yeah.
just thought, "Oh, well, they did a deal with OpenAI
And they have
because
a
they
deal with
couldn't."
OpenAI, right?
They
So,
absolutely
I
do.
really like the description of that, which we'll talk about. But I think I don't know. Sorry, we made predictions. I think we did pretty good.
Yes. Oh, no doubt. I mean, like
They hit
the
privacy. They hit
prediction
that privacy nail extremely
nailed
hard.
it. So
Yeah.
yeah, if we let's take a look at the personal context part of it. That was the private. That's really where the privacy comes into play.
hmm
So the way we had framed it up, just to kind of set the stage for this, is that we said, what are they going to do? How are they going to train a model? And by the way, first of all, this is kind of a big deal. So we were saying, how are they going to train a model because they have this position on data privacy?
Yep.
So then if you have a position on data privacy, how do you train a model? Well, here is the answer. I dug very deep into this and I finally found the answer. So here's their official statement on the data they use to train their two foundation models, which we'll
Hmm.
go into it here in a second. Training data includes licensed data and publicly available data collected by Applebot. Applebot. Apple has a web crawler. Did you know this? I did not
No.
know this. So
Hmm.
I did a little bit of research, and sure
About
enough,
Applebot.
they have a web crawler.
It's on the Apple
So
website
it's
information.
and it's not even new. This is
Yeah.
apparently something that they've had for a long time. So their statement on it is it's licensed data and publicly available data collected by Applebot, Apple's web crawler. Web publishers can, in fact, opt out of having their content used for Apple Intelligence training.
Yep.
That would probably be something good to know before the training, but you can go in there and opt out if you don't want to be part of future training, right? So they basically had to train models, and so they did it with their own data. And I'm sure to some
Hmm.
degree I didn't hear any, maybe I've missed some announcements on the licensing agreements that they came up with, but they came up with two different models to do that. So that's kind of a big deal. Now we
That's good.
said, great, that's one of the privacy things. The second thing is, what data does Apple have access to that nobody has access to? And you and I talked a
Me.
lot about
We
their
did.
the
Yeah.
walled garden.
Yeah.
And so to me, that is hugely profound. Like, I don't know if there's many organizations, at least at the scale that Apple can, that can do the type of things that we're going to see with intelligence
I mean,
or personal
if you're
context,
fully in
sorry.
the Google ecosystem, wouldn't they have a huge amount of information on you? Like
I
if they
would
have,
fully expect. Well,
yeah.
actually, here this is an interesting point. Um, Google for Workplace and Microsoft, whatever the work thing is,
Hmm.
we're like here at iSolutions, we're a Google Workplace. Um, and so the Microsoft 365, the Copilot concept, right? So what's actually happening in those two cases?
Hmm.
Microsoft specifically has something called the Microsoft Graph, which is really what Copilot is for work is you've got all your stuff on their platform, meaning you've got all your PowerPoint presentations and your Google Docs, or wait,
Yep.
I'm sorry, whatever the
Yeah.
Microsoft ones
Sure.
are. And so it has the real technology is it creates this graph database, which is basically a data lake of all your organization's data. And then what Copilot does is it allows users to interact with that. So when you're buying Copilot, the revolutionary thing there isn't the Copilot part of it. It's the fact that all your data is pulled together in one place and now you can interact with it. Now, it's kind of a nothing burger if you don't have any of your information in the Microsoft platform
Yeah.
or the Google Workspaces platform.
Yep.
And Google Workspaces formally just announced I think they've kind of had it for a while, but they formally just sent an email out like 2 days ago
Yeah.
that says, hey, all your Google Docs and Google Sheets and your Gmail and all that stuff is now, accessible. So that's not revolutionary, but what Apple did is they said, hey, Matt, all your text messages and emails and various interactions that you have on device
Hmm.
within the private walled garden that we all trust
Yeah.
are now available to what I'm referring to as your personal graph. So
Great.
that's what they're talking about when they talk about personal context. And
Yeah. And
and
I
to
think a
me,
couple of big things, right? So there's that. The data never goes to Apple servers. And the AI processing actually happens on the processor on my device, not in the cloud, unless there's
yeah, and I
circumstances
have
where it does. So that's really, really big. And I think that's also kind of what we predicted
yeah, well,
because of the privacy stance.
and also some acquisitions that they made were all
Yeah.
about running models on the device.
Well, yeah, we
And
did get a
so
clue.
there were definitely some breadcrumbs. Now, so what you just mentioned is a really big deal. So that's how they're facilitating it. And I'm going to share, I'll have the
Yeah.
YouTube folks get ready in a second because I'm going to share what we're talking about and show this what they released. But to speak to the personal context thing, this is such an important idea when it comes to interacting with language models in general. Let me zoom out for a second and then we'll zoom
Yeah.
back in. Zooming out, like I did a prompting webinar, a prompting basics webinar, and one of the
Mhm.
principles that I shared with everybody is instead of saying, when you're prompting and like I think everybody when they first start prompting or they start looking up prompting guidelines, they run across say to the model, you are a helpful assistant, right? Like like somehow it's not helpful or it's not an assistant. Like it's
Yeah,
not about when you're prompting and you're interacting with these language models, it's a nothing burger to tell it what it is. You tell it what who you are is the point. So we have this concept of called user personas. And
yeah,
every one of our, I talked about this in the Gauge conference. Um, and some of the user personas that we write for our deployments are pages and pages long, man.
sure.
Like, and then in addition to the user persona, like on our intuition platform, which I'll show a little bit later on, we can identify, these are multi-user platforms. So we identify who each user is. Each user gets their own persona, right? The personal intelligence, right?
Hmm.
Or God, I keep calling it personal intelligence. It's a personal context.
Hmm.
And why is personal context meaningful? Because you care about certain things. Like if you and I work at the same company, you care about certain things to do your job. I care about certain things to do my job. I look at information a certain way, or I have access to certain information, whatever it is. So
Hmm.
you and I could ask the same exact question to the same exact language model and get
Yeah,
significantly different answers
absolutely.
because if it
Yeah,
knows who I am versus
yeah.
who you are. So
That
now,
source of truth
oh,
thing that I let you talk about, right? Yeah.
all the time. So providing the truth and then also telling it who I am and what I care about. That's how
Hmm.
we actually focus the aperture on what I care about. So that's
Right.
I would say it is somewhat controversial. Well, because none of these people are listening to us right now, but if for some reason you're just dismissing AI and because like you asked a couple of questions to
Yeah.
ChatGPT and it got the answers wrong, I am here to say that's just as much on you, person not listening right now, as it is on the models. Like
Yeah.
you have to know how to ask the questions. And so providing
Yeah.
context about who you are helps you get those right. Now that's what Apple did here. So it knows I'm a little worried about maybe
How much it
some of the
knows.
things that yeah, well, I mean, I'm not always being
Yeah.
professional when I'm texting my friends and, emailing people and stuff like that.
Oh,
So I wonder how much of that it's going to bring into my context, but I think there's really
yeah.
interesting intelligence behind all that. So
Yeah, that's
I don't know
terrific about that.
your thoughts on how do you feel about letting Apple into your walled garden to make your AI experience more
I
more
I
personalized?
actually think that the amount of data that my Apple Watch knows about me is insane.
If you trust that, like it literally knows how your heart is pumping, right? Like it
Yeah.
knows more about you than you do, frankly, right? So
Yeah.
I think we've already gone to the level of extending
I mean,
trust.
I doubt they do it, but if I'm watching a movie on Apple TV, it can monitor my heart rate and see if I like the movie or not, right? It can presume that,
Oh, I
you know,
love that. That's
yeah,
actually a brilliant idea. Yeah, and I mean, algorithms have been tracking our likes and dislikes forever. Like every
right,
time
yeah,
you
yeah,
go
yeah.
on to Netflix and say you don't like, by the way, here's a little secret. Every time I go and I don't like a movie on Netflix, I go pick another movie somewhere and don't like it as well, just to balance my algorithm out. So I
Oh,
don't want it to think like I have like this bias or something like that. So Apple knows all those decisions for us as well. So okay, so
let's talk about the models and the performance of them and kind of where stuff's going
okay,
to get done.
so first, if anyone's wondering what the ultimate resource is, this is going to be in the show notes. This is the paper called Introducing Apple's On-Device and Server Foundation Models. They don't have like a fancy name for them, like, Gemini or something like that. They're just Apple's on-device and server foundation models. So, when you get past the hypnotic header here, this was all the stuff that was reviewed essentially and there are some sessions, but mostly in the State of the Union. So first off, let's take a look at this part. They talked a little bit about the
Retraining,
training.
what's
Let's
training,
actually go. Yeah, we're going to look at the architecture here.
optimization.
So they
Yeah.
did something really interesting when they trained these models for starters. They did this concept of adapters, which is, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, but it seems very similar to me to like this mix of experts approach. If anyone listening is familiar with that, it really just sort of like segmented out. And for those that are looking on screen, it segments out summarization, proofreading, mail replies, that kind of stuff. So it's really saying like, hey, um, this part of the architecture is assigned for summarization. So you go do
Mm.
summarization and you do tone adjustment and all that. And then they all kind of come together as one. Now,
So
um
multimodal, you mean, kind of a thing?
yeah, multimodal generally indicates like its ability to process images or video or audio
Different
and
types of
text.
things, not just different models for text processing like we just saw.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
different expertise, basically, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at this. So here's actually this is what the architecture really looks
Yeah.
like.
This is a
So
really good chart here.
so down here, so to kind of talk people through it, the silicon is such an important part of this, right? Like they've been
Hmm.
moving in this direction and it is meaningful to us. And by the way, I just like ordered a M3 Max to get ready for all this. The super light and thin iPad that you mentioned in jest
Yeah.
earlier actually is
M4.
intended to be able to run these types of things. And shoot, now's as good a time as any to just mention this, but for those that are interested in this stuff, I did a little sleuthing and found out that in order to run all these things, whenever the heck they come out, not every phone or device is going to be able to run them. So
Of
we're
course.
showing the list on screen, but you basically the
Goes all the way
litmus test
back to the
is,
iPhone XR in 12. Dang. Or 11.
isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
iPhone
iPhone
11.
11. So basically, so like my wife has a iPhone 13 mini because she loves the mini because it
Mm,
fits in her purses and stuff. And I looked this up to see if she'd be able to run the AI stuff. So yeah, all the way back to XR. So basically anything that can run iOS 17 can run these. And that was kind of interesting because I thought it was going to be exclusive to the Apple Silicon
right.
devices, right? So you'll notice that they're leveraging their silicon both on device, which is for those viewing, that's what's on the left, and on the servers as well too. Their servers, right?
Also Apple
Which
Silicon. That was
Apple also,
fascinating.
and I mean, we don't have access to these servers ourselves, but over here on the upper right-hand
Yeah.
corner, and sorry for those that are listening, I'm just pointing to the server stack. This is the thing that we just looked at a little bit, that has these adapters in there. You can kind of see visually, Matt, that they've got adapters going in the language and the image side.
Yeah.
So without getting too into the weeds, this adapter thing is kind of one of the things that actually makes them special. So over here on device, the left-hand side, but above the silicon is where the on-device models actually live, which is really, really cool. And it has a semantic index, which is akin to, we've talked a lot about vector databases and searching
Yeah.
and the vector index. It's basically on-device semantic vector database for practical purposes. And then the app intents toolbox. We're going to get to that in a second. That is actually kind of a big deal as it pertains to us Claris folks. And then up on the top are all the apps in the experiences. Siri, the writing tools,
Yeah.
your favorite new tool, the Jamoji, and Image Playground, which I know you
I,
can't wait to get your
I
hands on.
entirely forgot about that whole Anjimochi thing. You keep bringing it up, but whatever.
Oh, because I'm so excited about it.
The
So
memojis totally missed me too. Whatever.
um
Okay, now this
so
this chart here you're looking at, the writing
yeah,
benchmarks on device server blah, totally confused me because they're talking about
okay.
these models and right. So Apple on device, like on your device,
Well, so
Mistral
so they
7B, Gemma 7B, V-3 Mini.
yeah. So
Uh,
first of all, why are we even looking at writing benchmarks? Well, first of all, they really announced three things that you can do on device slash push up to the server every now and then. It's writing tools, which is like Grammarly and, ChatGPT or whatever.
yeah.
Image generation, which is I won't mention it again, Jamoji and
Mhm.
Image Playground. And then the third one is is uh well it so, and I completely forgot what the third one is, but we'll get to that in a second. But here's the deal. What are benchmarks? Benchmarks generally, when a new model comes out, you go to Hugging Face and they've got all these different like leaderboards, they call them.
Yeah.
And they list, they kind of agree, like the industry agrees as a whole, like here's all the different ways that we can evaluate a model and they run it through these tests. And so every time a new model comes out, generally the model trainers will run them through the benchmarks so we can compare. Apple did not use the benchmarks that the rest of the industry standard uses. They created their own benchmarks. And instead of revealing how, what the tests were, they basically said, here's how we stack up against other models. Now, so we're looking on the left-hand side at on device
On
and on the
device
right-hand side as the
server.
server. So here's how to interpret what this means. We're looking at the idea of summarization of text, which is like when they talked about their feature which is a great use of language models, by the way, even in your applications, summarizing meetings
Big
or,
time.
yeah, I mean, like if you're not summarizing your meetings with AI, what are you doing? Like, what are you waiting for? Like, it just makes no sense not to do that
Yeah.
anymore. Composition, though, is where you're actually writing things, like
Right.
write me a blog article or something.
Right.
So we see Apple on device model right on the top. Like they're saying, hey, these are the best models. Well, let me give you some context here. If we just look at summarization, Apple on device is the top of the leaderboard, but it is only on top of these models called Mistral 7B, Gemma 7B, Phi 3 Mini, and Gemma 2B. What are those things?
Yeah.
Those are really small 7B and 2B and 3B mean billion parameters. Just for some context, OpenAI's 3.5, GPT 3.5 was
Hmm.
about 480 billion parameters. And
And these are
some
seven
say that
billion, 3 billion. Okay.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so this is why this is super important. Like, if you're thinking of like, I talked a lot about and engage about how important open source models are, for example, right? The problem with open source models is they don't have the same capabilities of the foundation models up in the cloud. And so, and then also, if you're going to run them locally, you need a massive amount of compute.
Right.
Whereas you don't have to pay for token costs, but the amount of compute that you need is ridiculous, to the point where my team, we basically have a threshold at about 10 billion parameters that you just can't run these in production at any level of cost that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
So
I guess the question I would have for you, I think I had it a while ago. Um, how much compute does a basic query take on, say, ChatGPT for Omega Omicron 4.0?
yeah, it's so well, we don't know because you can't run those locally, and OpenAI or slash
Yeah,
Azure,
yeah.
or Microsoft Azure takes that. So
They don't
so a
publish it.
good way to measure that is exactly and I appreciate you bringing it up in this context. It's in the billion parameters, right? So I would say that about 10 times the size of the models that are running on device
Mhm.
is about the maximum that you would reasonably like want to pay for to run on like an AWS extra large.
Yeah, I guess.
And we get into like GPU
Well, I
availability
mean,
and all that kind
if
of
I
stuff as well
had
too.
if I had a bunch of, let's just say I had a bunch of Mac Minis or whatever, and I wanted to wire them up with a model for um, that was GTP 4.0, and I did a query, and it came back with a response in 2 seconds. How many Mac Minis would it take to produce the same result that I'm getting? Is kind of my question.
Uh,
What's the
yeah,
compute
well,
power we're talking about?
literally, we don't know the answer because that information is obfuscated from us because only OpenAI knows that answer.
Right.
So the only way we would know that answer is if we use an open source model. And so
Okay.
that's what I mean by saying around like when you get up into
Yeah.
the 7 dB, you
Yeah.
can't reasonably run those on any kind of arc. First of all, Mac
So
Mini
we're
is
talking
completely out
about
of the question.
hundreds of Mac Minis then for
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
We're
Yeah.
talking about actually not even CPUs, but GPUs. That's where this
Right.
whole GPU conversation
The
comes into play. And
NVIDIA. Yeah.
yeah, you want to run on the NVIDIA H100s,
Yeah.
and that's why there's a space race for all that, is because OpenAI needs like tens of thousands of those
Got it.
for
Got it.
you to
Got
be
it.
able
Okay. So
to
that's the
cascade.
server stuff. So the on-device, obviously, it's not going to be able to handle the same kind of a model. Um,
Well, so what why this is meaningful is because imagine a slider, Matt, where capabilities of the model and the compute necessary kind
mhm,
of like slide in this continuum. And
sure.
so you want to find the sweet spot. If you want to find a model that runs on your phone, whether it's an M3 Apple Silicon or
Hmm.
whatever,
Hmm.
you're moving that slider pretty far to the left on capabilities. So we see evidence of this on this chart right here, where it says basically the Apple on device, when it comes to summarization
Hmm.
and composition of text, is akin to Mistral, which
Hmm.
is a
Hmm.
French open source model, 7B, or Gemma, which is Gemini's, and Phi 3 is Microsoft's 7B. I personally thought they were probably closer to the 3B model, so I was kind of impressed that they were more than that. But the
Okay.
point is, like, they're nowhere close to GPT 3.0, let
Right.
alone
Yeah.
3.5 or
Yeah. Yeah.
4.0.
Of
Okay, just so
course.
we're
Yeah.
clear on that. So, but it doesn't need to be, right? Because what is it doing? Summarizing text and writing text? Cool. And
Yeah.
again, remember, we don't use models to answer questions. That's not business use case, and that's silly talk.
Yeah. So the
This is
server
for
column, let's look
doing
at the
things.
servers,
Server,
right?
on the other hand, just to kind of frame this up, why is this important? Well, you alluded to this earlier, that sometimes somewhere in their architecture, they recognize this thing that Matt just asked Siri to do or something like that, right?
Right.
It's going to need a model it's not even talking about compute. It's saying the model Mistral 7B or these 7B models aren't going to be enough for what you
Right.
want to do, right? So we want to kick it off to the server. And so then there's all this sophisticated stuff they do where they're, I don't know, they didn't even really reveal it, but it's super private and you're taking your data and it's
Mhm.
sending it up to the server to just perform this one task. And just to be really clear, this is not the role that ChatGPT plays. This is not sending it to the OpenAI models. I actually
Right.
left the first presentation thinking that might be the case. So in that case, it is more akin to the performance of, as those who can see on screen, GPT-4 Turbo, which is not the 4.0, it's the predecessor to that.
Right. Yeah.
Mixtral, Mix of Experts, which is 8 by 22B. That to give you an idea, that's about the maximum Mixtral. That one actually, the 22 billion parameter, that one's about what you can probably run on like an AWS XL with some
Oh,
GPU access to give you an
got it.
idea.
Okay.
So, but even on, so that's summarization of text, and then composition. Apple says, well, we can't quite beat GPT-4 Turbo at
But I
this,
mean, we're
but
talking about
we're,
9.5 versus 9.7.
those
All these
numbers,
charts
by
are
the way,
so
are
close to each other.
those are
But
just whatever Apple came up with for
right.
their metrics. So it's more about
Right.
the ranking, like where they're close to than anything else, right?
So I
So
guess here's my big question on this. Apple server. So Apple has server farms with some kind of a computer that you can't buy that has Apple chips in it, CPU and GPU chips.
yeah, yes,
So
basically
so the
yes.
server farms that Apple has been using all along, or whatever, maybe have not been using the same kind of machines or that other server farms are using. I guess I should. I don't know. Maybe that's something other people know, but I didn't know that. Um,
I, I I don't think this. I'm not even entirely sure this is public knowledge prior to
this
their
announcement. Yeah.
yeah, this announcement. I don't have any evidence of that at all. And by the way, the last thing I'll show you on comparing is just
Mhm.
they did another thing, win, lose, or tie, which is a unique way to
Also
benchmark
super
this where
confusing, but yeah, go ahead.
so they're basically just saying again, these are the way to look at a chart like this is just to simply say how these models perform closer to what models we can get our hands on and test already.
Sure.
And that's the Mistral 7Bs and the 3.5 turbos and stuff like that. So I would say I'm not like dejected in any way by these being substandard to the frontier models that are available
Yeah.
in the cloud
I think all of that shows
because
that they're right on par,
they're
basically.
on par.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I'll put a bow on that. You just you don't need a GPT-4 Omni for everything you do. Okay.
Why else would I?
Like,
I mean, what else would, you know,
well, if you
I
wanted to
don't
do
switch to some other
reasoning,
model.
well, understood, but I mean, like, if you're just saying summarize these meeting notes, you can
Right.
do that with GPT-4 3.0, let
And get
alone
them much faster. Yeah.
well, yeah, and cheaper
Yeah.
as well too, right? So these
Yeah.
are all factors in there. So so let's talk about some stuff that like I dug a little deep. So my first thought was like, oh, cool. Okay, how do I get access to these models? Right? Like, is there an API? Because like all the other, OpenAI announces a new one, and later that day you just go to their documentation API documentation and figure out how to update it. Which, by the way, allows us to swap out new model versions on announcements within an hour. Like the when GPT-4 Turbo went to GPT-4 Omni,
Hmm.
we updated our intuition platform within 45 minutes to
Whoa.
the new model. It's
So you're
just
so like,
APIs.
yeah. So swapping out to a new model is not a thing, not any kind of a
No,
thing. Backwards
not at
compatibility.
all. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact,
Good to
when
know.
3.5 or when 3 went to 3.5, or no, when 3.5 went to GPT-4, I was on an airplane flying home and I was like, oh my God, I want to record a video of this when I get home. I got home and within an hour, I'd updated all my testing things to the new one. And actually, no, that was 3 point. Basically, it
But
was where
but they didn't deprecate the old one, right? The old ones stick around for a good long time,
they, no,
or do they?
I did a study and the least amount of time they gave you for deprecation between announcement to deprecation was 6 months. And to give you an idea, that's how when QuickBooks Online did a deprecation of some payment API that they
Hmm.
did, they gave 6 months as well too. Some APIs give like 12 months, but
Yeah.
the minimum I found as a comparison was 6 months, and OpenAI
Okay.
has never given you less time than that. The big one though that I think people point to is, and actually that in the anecdote where I was flying home and I wanted to test was actually when the um the completion endpoint changed to the chat endpoint. So it
Hmm.
really was kind of a fundamental change in the structure of your APIs. But even that one, like literally, I got home, sat here
Hmm.
in less than
So
an hour
this
or
is
two, I
extremely good
updated them
news then
all.
for people doing this. So tell
I
me, I'm not sure what you were in the middle of, but I want to kind of finish up the what takeaways you had from the Apple announcements.
Okay,
What's your overall
my
feeling?
my takeaways were there's a gap in and then we'll talk about how I think us Claris folks can get our mitts on these things and what that means to us. So my takeaways though were this. There's a huge void in AI for personal AI, a literal personal assistant. And I'm not talking so much about the fact that we can talk to Siri and all that stuff.
Hmm.
That's the interface for this, right? I would say that Apple nailed it because they filled the void of my personal information, and I get to use that from an AI standpoint. As a matter of
Yeah,
fact, I think this is the role that Siri was always meant to play. Oh, stop. I'm not talking to you, Siri. I got about three Siris now responding to me.
I don't even know where my
We're
phone
not
is
quite there yet,
somewhere.
but the point being that so we got Siri and we could ask it questions, and then for a year we thought that was the coolest thing ever, and that's what AI meant to most of us. That was like
Yeah.
12 years ago, by the way,
Oh
just
my
for
God.
some perspective.
Yeah.
And then like 2 years later, just all of us turned it off, and none of it. We were so frustrated by its uselessness, like giving me a list of web searches. Like, come on, man,
Yeah.
like it just didn't make any sense.
I know.
But here's and maybe this can so now it knows everything about me. As a matter of fact, ever since the announcement, I've just been logging all these examples of when hopefully the Siri with personal context, the Apple
Yeah.
Intelligence
Yeah.
version will be more useful. Like last night, I was with my wife and we were walking out of we were walking out of a baseball game, and we were like, oh, we should call so and so to do the blah blah blah. And I was like, I don't remember when she said she was coming back from her vacation. Like I should
Right.
absolutely be able to say, Siri, just go, was there an
Yeah.
email
What
or
time is she
text or
coming
whatever,
back
go
from?
find
Yeah.
out when so and so is going to come back, and then whatever, right? That is what we're going to be able to do, and that I
Yeah.
think is
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
void that they filled. Did they say from a business computing standpoint, like look out OpenAI and Gemini, like here comes Apple? No, none of that happened, and nor did it have to. I don't think it had to happen for us to care about that. So
Right.
great. I don't. What was your reaction, by the way? I want to
So
give you a chance.
I mean I was kind of impressed by a lot of the stuff for sure. I mean, I thought that, hey, they've got it. They're on the right track. The single example they gave for Siri was so stupid. It was like, come on, man. The example was
The flight thing with the
give me
mom showing
directions
up.
to no, it was like give me directions to uh Smith Rock State Park or whatever. Oh wait, no, I mean Smith Creek State Park.
Oh, that was so dumb. Yeah, I'm sorry. That one was like, I was like, oh no, you had me for a second. And now I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no, that's even worse than what. So,
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, that was a semantic use case. Like, and I think if I bring that down to Claris people level, one of the biggest frustrations we've had with lexical searching was that like the Jonathan thing, or the
Yeah.
DR period versus doctor thing. Well,
That's coming up.
semantics can help us with that, right? And that's a tease for something that's coming up
Yep,
here.
it is.
Um, so here's what I think, just from a Apple consumer, fanboy standpoint, what this means, and then we'll talk about the Claire's thing, and then we can get into that very tease that you just meant. Um, Here's where it's a big deal: is not only does Apple have all your personal context, and does it have this infrastructure for intelligence, but it also, what they were really revealing, and I think if I'm going to give them some credit, why there's no dates about when any of this is going to be available. And it seems like maybe they just said, oh, let's catch up and give an announcement, but we're not going to give any dates because this could take a year. This was a developer conference. So what they were saying was, look, here's a bunch of tools for all the developers who have apps to go out and build Apple Intelligence into your apps. What does that mean for us? There's this concept earlier this year that was referred to as large action models. Remember, I think it was like uh right after New Year's. What's the conference in Vegas? I'm sorry, I'm such an idiot.
Well, there's the NAMM
The
show for music.
CS
The Consumer Electronics Show?
Yeah, consumer
Yeah.
electronics. So the big runaway hit of
Yeah.
consumer electronics was the Rabbit device, and Matt, like the second I saw it, I was just like, everybody just stop it. And you know, I'm a bit of a cynic, but what it
Yeah.
was this little brick that was basically OpenAI, but with the ability to like run actions. There were
Oh,
two reasons why I was so dismissive about that. Well, A, you can have your own. We can have OpenAI run API
yeah.
endpoints already.
Yeah.
But the real reason why is because it was this brick. Well, first of all, it's sold out. It was the most popular thing.
Yeah.
People were
I've
freaking
never
out.
heard of it.
Just okay, well, don't, because it
Yeah. Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
complete waste of time.
Okay.
And the reason why it was a waste of time is because you would have had to carry two things in your pocket now. This dumb little rabbit brick and then your
Yeah.
phone. What Apple just did, well, first of all, literally anyone who has one of those rabbits, throw it in the garbage. I'll wait. Okay. And here's why, because now
Well, you got to wait
Apple
till fall
allows you to,
though.
well, but the point is,
Yeah.
it was always coming. It was always
Yeah.
going to be that you could do this same thing. And what is this that we're talking about? What
Yeah.
we're
What is this?
talking about is um, not only be able to, it's going to have access to all these apps, and it can orchestrate these things that we're talking about. So when we're talking about like looking into my emails, my text messages to see
Mhm.
when our friend is getting back from her vacation,
Mhm.
those are all Apple apps. The big thing is going to be when you can do things like saying, hey, Matt's coming over for dinner on Saturday. Go check Open Table to see if our favorite restaurant has
Mhm.
availability at 10
Right.
p.m. If not, then go find off of their menu our favorite appetizer, and then go into Instacart, another third-party app,
Mhm.
and put in all the ingredients to make this at home, fill up a cart, and
Right.
have it scheduled to deliver to my house. That Apple couldn't yet reach into those applications. Now
Right.
it can. That's what loosely is what app intents is. They're essentially APIs that API wires that are hanging out of all our apps that we can build. So there's a
Hmm.
bunch of them.
Good
There's
way to
a
put it.
natural language API, a vision API, and a speech API that they announced it that we have availability to. Not we, but like app developers do. And I want to be clear, we're not actually app developers. I know we
Yeah.
like hijack the term app,
We're relational
which
database developers,
we
but anyway, yeah.
probably should have never done. Yeah. So app developers using Swift can do this. So what can Claris do? Well, aside from the natural language endpoints, the vision endpoints, and the speech API
Mhm.
endpoints, which are literally API endpoints, currently my understanding is, and I'm getting into the area where I could be wrong in a bunch of stuff, and I just haven't had time to like rabbit hole. Sorry about the rabbit device, but rabbit hole into these things.
Sure.
If they're just wide open endpoints and we could just connect to them from FileMaker, cool, done. But I don't have any evidence of that right now.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
believe these are through Swift. But here's something amazing. Oh my God. Okay. And you can laugh at me when I'm totally wrong about this, but let's just have some fun and pretend that I actually discovered something. So look at these models. On screen, I'm showing a list of models. Whisper, which is OpenAI's open source model that translates speech into text inputs and text into speech. That's how we actually talk with the app, right? And that is totally available for us as FileMaker users it's a open source model. You can just go on GitHub and use. Stable Diffusion, of course, is the diffusion model creator one. The rest of them, Mistral, Llama, Falcon, those are all open source models. We saw a couple of those on those benchmark lists. Those are ones that you can go download and run locally on your device. And I would say before you think open source is all like, you don't have to pay for those token wise, but you definitely have to pay
Yeah.
per compute. And then there's Clip, Quinn, and Open ELM. What are
Hmm.
those? Well, go read the article about things that Apple dropped before this announcement. Those are models that they dropped and that are also available. So what do all these things have in common? Matt, we can use we'll be able to use CoreML has a tool called CreateML.
Okay.
We've danced around this topic in the past because in FileMaker, you
Yeah.
can go train your own model and then at the end compress it into this thing that's called a .ml model file. Does that sound familiar?
That's been
Because
from the early day stuff, like before the recent crop of AI stuff that came out in
FileMaker
the newest
19,
version. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Core ML stuff.
Yeah.
So the .ml model files are meaningful to Claris folks because you can take those models after you create them and drop them into a FileMaker container field, and with some supported native script steps with FileMaker, like run them, make them available in that user's session. Huge deal,
Yeah.
right?
Cris, is this the first podcast you and I have done since FileMaker 2024 shipped? I think it actually is.
No,
Which
we
we
did one with
did we do one?
Ronnie.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
We
thinking
did
because I
a huge
oh, that's right, that's right, that's right. I did it at the conference because I anyway, because
we
my brain was connecting things weirdly because of our
we
next
did
topic when I'm talking
yeah,
about
we did
the
a 90-minute one that everyone should check out because Ronnie Rios, the product
killed it.
manager of FileMaker 2024, came and
Yeah.
went through line by line of all the different features. So yes,
All
I
right,
know you
fine.
just teased me. So what does this mean? Because this is a big deal.
Okay.
They said that now you can take any one of those models that we just listed off, run them through the Core ML tools, which is both the Create ML tool that is part of Xcode,
Hmm.
and also there's a command line interface that you can run from within a FileMaker script to run Core ML tools
Hmm.
that will take those models and make them into a .ml model file, Matt. So imagine if this means I can actually take Mistral 7b, turn it into an ML model file and drop it into a container field in FileMaker and run that, send data to it and
Yeah.
get data back. If
Yeah.
if this discovery is what I think it is, oh my God,
And that's going to be Apple only because some of the Core ML stuff was Apple only.
it all is. So with
Yeah.
so
Well,
so
I guess
a
I was
little
thinking
bit of
like
a
Mac versus iOS, but yeah, Apple. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well, a
Okay.
little bucket of water on that. But yes, I think people need to know that the reason that we don't hear a lot about Core ML probably is because it's Apple only.
Yep.
But think about this instead. On device, you've got a FileMaker app that you want to run through the SDK and manage in an MDM
Hmm.
for business use cases on device. That currently has access to these Create ML models. So you've seen demonstrations. I got a bunch of stuff on the internet of like creating image or vision models that recognize
Hmm.
things. And you point your phone at it in your FileMaker app and you go, what is this thing? And it goes, oh, it's a Spark plug. And here's the record in your FileMaker
Yep.
database for that. We've been able to
That's
do that for 5 or 6 years,
yeah,
right?
I remember that demo. They actually use a
So
spark plug.
ima imagine that actual thing but using Mistral or Falcon or
Hmm.
Whisper or some of the other models that we just looked at.
Yeah.
That's how I think people should be looking at this, and I think that is potentially very profound. Whether it's just for Apple or not, it could also just be for
Yeah.
devices, right?
Yeah.
That also communicate with FileMaker server through non-Apple environments. So TBD on what that means. And by the way, just and then we'll get to your announcement. So to put a bow on this, the fact that Core ML is Apple only is what got me to go look for cloud-based API models in the
Mm-hmm.
first place. Because
Hmm.
I was doing things like summarization and sentiment analysis and keyword extraction. And I thought, well, I can only do this on Mac. So I bet you there's a cloud service out there that does it. And
Yeah.
oh, great, they have API access. Cool. So sorry, Core ML. I don't need you anymore. I can do cross-platform
Yeah.
model integration this way. And that's ultimately what led me to GPT-3 as well,
Great.
too. So
Yep.
thank you, CoreML, for not being cross-platform. Okay.
All
So
right.
lots to check out. Check out the link in the show notes of some of the stuff we've been talking about here. Okay,
So
Matt.
next topics. So I was at the .fmp conference and that which happened,
In
I think,
Berlin.
In Berlin, which happened 2 days after 2024 shipped. So all these people
Yeah,
had sessions and they couldn't list what it was for. But a lot of them knew that what was going to happen. They didn't know when it was going to happen, but they were able to actually change their session description and then show them stuff. It was awesome. It was like such perfect timing. Um,
I
and
think
then
actually so they updated their per what you were talking, the timeline you were talking about before. They were able
yeah,
to update all their stuff when the announcement came out, but it was still a week
yeah.
later that you went to the conference, which is still like a week. Are you kidding me? Everybody had all this stuff already.
And no, it was really
Because
only a
in
couple
between
days. The first session was like, I think literally 2 or 3 days after. It wasn't like a whole week or something. Yeah.
3 days after the launch, you and I did our interview with
Right.
Ronnie Rios, and
Yeah,
you had
and I
not
was
yet gone to
at the
Berlin.
conference. Yeah. So
Oh yeah, you were
yeah,
at the conference.
I did
Perfect.
that
Now we're putting
from
it all
Berlin.
together.
And this is kind of why I forgot it because I was in the middle, like we did that one, and that was like, 3% of the stuff coming at me that week because
Of
I was in all these
course.
other sessions, right? Um,
So, and by the way, you did some great interviews. If people want to look at our bonus
yep,
episode
the
from
one
last week, you
previous.
can talk to some folks about that. But by the way,
Yeah, that
was
was
that the
good.
last
It
Berlin
was.
conference? Why?
Yeah.
I don't
So
understand.
the guy who runs it, actually the very last recording of the last episode, he talks about it exactly why. But he had been running it for I think 12 years and all alone. Like it's just his deal, his baby.
Mm,
Um, and that's a lot, right? So
agreed.
the other conferences that happen in Europe have teams behind them, or even like multiple companies for the Engage U conference. And the Engage U conference last year had 200 plus people, and they're aiming for 300 people this year.
Wow.
Um, and so that's
And
by far the largest English speaking conference in Europe.
now,
Anyway, so at this conference, I there was so much awesome AI stuff. It was great, and there was a lot of other really good things as well. Uh, Kevin Frank was there showing some amazing stuff. That guy's kind of smart. um,
what
uh,
um what was your favorite like takeaway?
oh man,
Just like
too many things are kind of jumping in my head right now. Um, I think it was actually some of the simplicity, some of the stuff that looked simpler that maybe isn't so quite so simple for the new script steps that we have in 2024.
mhm.
Right? The embed and
Yep.
the perform semantic find. Right?
Yes.
Those two are the key. And there's one other one which is like basically
They're
set it up,
essentially
configure.
companions with each
Yeah.
other. Like you
Yeah,
need
you
one to
configure it,
perform
and
the
that's the one
search.
you send the username and password. And that's the only time you send the password. And then the subsequent calls either embed or
Hmm.
do a find. The embedding is an API call, and all the perform finds happen locally. So basically, seeing all those demos um, and used in different ways, and how short of a script you can make
Mm.
was kind of the big thing that I saw. And I saw many different uses of it. There's some great discussions. Um, but then I guess I'll just tie this into the next thing, right?
Please.
Um, uh, so
And for some context, we've been
yeah,
talking about the idea of semantic search in a lot of the episodes.
yeah.
And one of the personal challenges is, well, you're very well known for having a search. I'm not going to call it a product, but it's a
Well, it
proof
was
of
at one
concept
point it was
file.
for sale, right? So
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
it's a completely well, it's called FM Search Results. I just call it Search Results now. It's version 7 is the most recent release. It's just available for free on my website, navarre.training. Um, I I still have yet to see a database that I think would not benefit from having it in there because it can search across all the tables and show you results on one page.
And now, were you originally doing this in the like virtual list era originally, or
Yeah,
what was the evolution of your
the
technique?
first version of it actually was a virtual list.
Okay,
Actually,
kind of
I don't know if
remember
it
that
was that.
one.
No, it was even before that, actually. I think it was actually repeating global field with the display. So the search step
I've
happens at the back end, but then there's different widgets to display the data. So it
I
was a
feel like I
virtual,
saw you. Did you present at DevCon in San Francisco
yeah,
on this?
I
I
did.
think I saw your session, and and it was maybe I thought then you were at the virtual list level. It was like the first time I saw somebody talk about virtual
Yeah,
lists.
it
Personally,
actually,
just for
it
me.
still is for the current version.
Okay.
Because it's showing JSON data. So you can basically take the JSON object and show it with whatever way you want. But the
Mm.
virtual list works really well. You know, a few hundred records into a table that have no data in it, and it just basically grabs a line number and says show this information. And when you click on the line, it knows the data that you're viewing and the metadata of like what table is that, what's the record number, and then navigates to that particular thing. So that's what's really cool about it. You can search across everything and it's wicked fast. Okay, that's
Amazing.
right. That's right. I just dated myself by saying wicked fast. Um,
Well, you also dated search because you were talking
right.
about virtual lists. So what would be the modern, and we've talked about this in our conversations, the modern adaptation of that would be to integrate semantic search somehow, right?
Yes. Well, see,
And you took
that's
the
exactly what
personal
I'm doing.
challenge for that.
That's what the gauntlet you threw down, and I picked it up. Is to basically begin rewriting it in addition to the other one to use semantic search.
Awesome.
So or semantic find, yeah. Um, so
Yeah, I
to
guess technically
basically,
it would be semantic find because we call
yeah.
searches finds in FileMaker.
So I have a lot of questions. I would actually like to have some conversations with people about the best way to do this. But kind of what I'm thinking is this. In order for semantic find to work, you have to have an embedding, which is you have to stick a blob of text into a container field, which is the
You need to
embedding.
first convert a blob of text
Yeah.
into actual embeddings, which are mathematical vectors that
Yes.
represent that
Yeah.
in a multidimensional space.
So imagine, if you will, a typical CRM type system. You have a company record, which has four
Hmm.
employees.
Hmm.
There's 20 invoices. There's a bunch of notes, and there's, maybe just that, right?
Okay. Okay.
So you take that record and basically create a JSON object of everything that has meaning embedded in it, right? So you can use types of JSON that actually say these are invoices, and you can and maybe even have some other stuff in there too
And the
to
meaning you're talking
describe it.
about is you're providing context in the structure of the JSON object.
Yes, exactly. By the naming convention, which is I didn't think about, but that's kind of cool. So it's actually a little bit of a
Which,
pain to do that for a whole entire set of records. You have to kind of loop, and there's some while stuff. So,
oh, because you're constructing an object. They're not
right.
just like go search for these results. You're actually taking fields from very potentially different contexts, actually, but you're assembling
Yeah.
them together as one JSON object.
So the way that I'm thinking that this was going to work is this. Um, in each table, when you edit a record or create a record, I think really edit, because when you create, there's nothing in it. It would
Okay.
um, it would create a JSON object for that information with all the nice stuff, and then go to another table, a table dedicated for search. That's the only place where your container field lives, and either create
The
or update a
container
record,
field, just to be clear, the container field, which is the
the
FileMaker
embedding.
2024
Yes.
binary that allows you to store the vectors, which is very
Yes.
meaningful because if it was text that you were doing, your indexes would be so insane and your performance would be ridiculous. So they have to be these new types of containers,
Actually,
which is a
not
really big
that
deal.
much bad. So it's if you store it as text, it's worse. The file's bigger, but it's not so bad. It's just definitely the best practice is for sure to do it as a container.
If you had like a database with like 1,000 meeting transcripts in it,
Yeah,
and you
it
wanted
would
to
be.
search within
I
them
get it.
and you turned on text,
Right.
like it would be
Well,
it
so
would
the
we'd
other
kind of
so the other
work
idea for
anymore.
my approach is so
But
what we're going to do is
what I
containers.
not throwing bucket of water on, I'm
Yeah, yeah,
saying these
yeah.
containers are a big deal. That's
Yeah, they're a big
huge and it's
deal.
awesome. Yeah. So
Definitely. So it goes into this dedicated table that's flat. It's going to have one record for every record in every table in your database that you want to search against.
awesome. Okay.
So in my example, you'd have one, it would have a record for the company, it'd have 5 records for the contacts, 50 records for the invoices, and 30 records for the follow-up contact notes or whatever.
Okay. Sure.
And then also, there may be an address table and a phone number table and some other little and small ones.
Yeah. Like basically child table
Yeah,
to the,
exactly.
yeah.
And then maybe the little tiny ones, it doesn't necessarily have to have a record for each thing, but for like an invoice and all of its line items, that would be like a record. You'd have a JSON object that would have the information. And
You're
then
saying
interestingly,
you could create an array for the small ones, as you're saying, like the addresses and phone
yes.
numbers. You could just do an array or
Yeah.
something
So
on the
basically, you're making
parent
one JSON
context.
object. And interestingly, the way that it works in 2024 is you have to have a field in the table that has the JSON thing, or what, you should do it in JSON, not text format, um, that you have to then embed. So the field and the embedding container have to both be a field. You cannot, unless I'm mistaken, embed from a variable.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought about that. I don't, yeah. I
Maybe you
guess that
can. I did it with a set of records. There's two different ways to do it. You can embed a single record, or you can embed a set of records, and it'll loop through and do them in chunks.
so
Okay, so
you're
once,
hoping that you had variables so that you could loop through and just create one variable to embed rather than
yeah,
have to do individual records,
yeah.
basically.
So my thought is, so then when you want to do a search, it would navigate to this table, because another key thing about semantic search is you must do the search from the table that you're in the same context. If you do a related search, it kills the performance, because it'll automatically do it server side, and it'll be,
Mm,
you know, hundreds of times or whatever faster, because the server
yeah.
has insanely fast access to all of the data in those container fields. I was thinking that for it to
Hmm.
read the data in the container fields, it would be slow. No, it's surprisingly fast, except if you have like 5 million records in your set that you're searching against, that's going to be slow.
So you're
But
saying the preference is local versus server as opposed to our normal thinking where we do PSOS and we push it off to the server
yeah,
because it has more processing power
yeah,
normally.
yeah, yeah, something like that. So,
Okay.
so one of the features that I had in search results is before you do a search, it actually determines what it is that you typed in. So if you type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it goes, oh, that's an integer. That could either be an invoice number or an account number, um,
Mm,
or a
clever.
dollar amount. So I'm only going to go look in those places.
Smart.
I'm not going to look for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a text field that contains notes. If you
Great.
type in something that's obviously an email address, it's going to look only in places where an email address can live. If you type in
Interesting.
something that looks like a name because there's a name lookup table, it looks only in the place where names exist. And then also does name substitution type stuff. If you type something that doesn't match any of those things, and there's several, there's date range, integer, decimal, blah blah blah. Then it goes, okay, well now I have to up the game, and I'll just assume it's text. But we could
Hmm.
even so, and then I could do a search for text, and which means I can either do a lexical search or a
Hmm.
semantic search, right?
Yep.
And then I can also look at only a small set of records. So for example, if I um, the code that runs it doesn't necessarily have to look at all million records in that table. It can say, oh, I know that what you're looking for, you started your search from an invoice layout. So I'm not going to look at the entire set. I'm
Just
going
your
to
related
find,
invoices.
yeah, so that one of the other records in that, one of the fields in that table, that's a dedicated table, would maybe be like table number or name or something. So then I would say, okay, find all the ones that are index, that are invoices, which would be fast, and then search
Yep.
only against those, or
Yeah,
all the ones that are
we were
invoices or line items or whatever.
well, we were kidding around about in our context episode earlier this
Hmm.
year where we said it's
Yeah.
not the context that you think, but you're actually doing a very clever use of the context that you do think it is, like us FileMaker people context, to establish where you're then doing your semantic searches. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually sneaky brilliant
We'll
there.
see.
So
I haven't done that much testing on it yet. But then the other thing I'm thinking is, what if the user types something in that they're now going to expect, which is, um, who are my best 3 sales reps in quarter 4 last year? That's not
mm.
something, the data's there. It has the invoices, but
Yep.
I don't know how that's going to work because that's not a search. That's like a report.
That's that's a reasoning. Well,
That's a
here I
reason.
have a thought for you. Here's my initial instinct. We talked earlier about personal context
Hmm.
and like when you're writing your prompts to speak to language models, you got to tell it who you are. Another thing you have to do is tell it who's going to consume your information. We
Hmm.
often refer to those as audience personas, right? And also then the rest of that is where you're providing instruction and giving it
Hmm.
information about what is a meaningful result. One of the things, one of the things that I'm zeroing in on, you said best. So we literally have customers who've come back to us with this, and I've seen people out in the wild talking about this,
Hmm.
and they go, "I just asked, I don't know, ChatGPT, what's the best,
Hmm.
Mexican restaurant near me or something like that." The
Yeah.
problem is the first thing these models are going to think is, "Well, what do you think the best is?" Right? And so I don't think that's a miss. I think that's an
Hmm.
opportunity to define within your either your user persona and or your audience persona what best means to them.
Right.
And when
Yeah.
we're writing user personas, we will literally say the way they utilize their data is they think that this is the biggest. Like we did a GPT for fantasy sports where I connected to this this fantasy football
Hmm.
API that I have, and instead of saying who's the best player, I defined on this like page of instruction what best means. This is better in this case, this column, when the higher is the better. In
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
column, it's this. And in
Hmm.
whenever you're deciding
This one's
between
lower
these
the better.
two,
Sure. Yeah.
exactly. So in your case, you could have profound, amazing things happen if you are able to define what best means, for
Yep.
example.
Yeah,
And we
exactly.
do. We all know that because we know what our users' workflows are and what they care about and all
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I think
And
that's an
so,
opportunity.
okay, so the embedding that does the
Hmm.
JSON, this is the other one of the other key parts. Well, you have to do one AI call that actually, well, that's one API call that you have to do that sends that information out and creates the embedding and then puts it back in. You can actually have that done on the server on your loan. It could be in-house. Um, And you could run that on, yeah, your FileMaker server or some other server in your building. But it's also super easy to do with the OpenAI API.
Yes. And
So,
I will say, just for some context, just
mhm,
from out in the real world on that, like we just did for one of our FileMaker customers,
mhm,
massive embeddings. It had nothing to do with search. It had to do with pairing and matching. I won't reveal what they were doing, but it involved, like, 2,000 records in a FileMaker database that
mhm.
had a big document that we extracted text from with the language model, and then we embedded that big block of text, kind of like
Yep,
what we were just talking about
yep, yep.
before. And we used OpenAI's large, which is the reason we did that is because there was so much text, we needed the dimensions.
Yeah.
Like, you have embedding models that have like 300 features or dimensions,
Hmm.
which means we did a thought experiment where I said, hey, define a bunch of features of the word soccer. And you gave me like five.
Hmm.
And so then we said, well, a language model can do 300 or up to 4,000. And that's why we use embedding models instead of
Hmm.
humans to do this, right? But on the 8,000 dimension embeddings model against like 2,600 records, it took like 2 hours to run
Yeah.
that on a server. So like
Yeah.
these are no joke. But it didn't matter because we were doing a set it and forget it, and then we can embed
Yeah.
one record at a time in the future, and it only
I'm
takes
trying to think of
seconds,
how
not
long.
hours, right?
Yeah, I think I don't know long I ran it for, but it was much, much faster than that
But
when I
but
did
the
some
point
test
is,
embeddings.
if you were to use like a haiku, which is
Hmm.
the 3 parameter billion parameter version of the Claude Opus, for example, which is what we did, it takes minutes then. So the point is,
Right.
the embedding model selection you're making not only has to do with speed, but the number of dimensions. And I
Hmm.
think that's a really important thing that people need to take very seriously
Yeah,
when they're making those decisions.
absolutely. So another concept that I have is, since there has to be this one API call, well, why don't I just do why don't I take that blob of JSON and do a API call that says, take this JSON and, using what you know about me, create a bigger JSON blob that describes exactly what this is, optimized for semantic search.
Great.
Then you take that and you embed it, and
Hmm.
now you have a much better thing to search against, I think. So this is,
And you're talking about using what you know about me is your user persona that you crafted for that individual
yes,
user that's
exactly,
executing that
exactly,
search.
or the
Brilliant.
system. Yeah, or the system. So this is work, right? This is
Yeah,
so.
by the way, user personas are the system for that one user
Mhm.
of your system of your application's API call. A lot
Yeah,
of people just like put in, that's where they put you are a helpful assistant, but you can put, I mean, we have so many tokens available. You can put
yeah.
tons of information about this person. By the way, you could, to your point, imagine if you said you're searching against a customer table for invoice information,
Hmm.
and you know who the user is. It's Cris is in your system and he's about to execute this search. Guess what? You also have a log of the last 1,500 searches
Yep,
that Cris did.
that's
You
true.
could you could actually incorporate those as context to make some of the decisions that you're talking about. Like, he's often found that these are the type, he only cares about California customers, or
Hmm.
whatever. Like, you can
Right.
model and provide that information about me into that search in the manner that you're talking about. And that's a big deal.
God, not with the perform semantic find feature. So there's maybe other ways you could do that, but I don't think you can send all that other information. At least I haven't played with it that far yet.
You mean to embed, or
Well,
to
the
to the
embedding can
to the
know that, but
language
the
model?
embedding is there one time, right? So you're embedding the information for a company record.
Unless unless you're embedding unless you're embedding that one array of
Yeah,
log on domain on the fly, and then coming back and doing it. And by the way, that's how chatbots work. So
yeah.
think about this for a second. So a
Okay.
chatbot with retrieval,
Hmm.
what you've already embedded a whole bunch of documents, like a bunch of HR documents. You did
Sure.
that weeks ago,
Yep.
and maybe that's a set it and forget it.
Hmm.
But then when the user is asking a question and they type the question into the chatbot, you're actually embedding that question real quick. Boom,
Sure.
shooting it off and embedding it, and then
Right,
doing a
right, right.
semantic search. So it's the same thing you're talking about. You could
Oh,
say, as
yes,
they're
of
asking a
course.
question, you just go, boom, go embed that. Then you could do your
Yeah.
semantic search based on that.
You're absolutely right. I forgot. I didn't connect that, but you're right. So before you do the search, the string that you're searching against, um,
Because there's two embeddings. There's the
Yeah, it can
user's
be
input or
great.
command that's being embedded, and then there's
The query.
the reservoir of stuff you're querying against
Yep.
in your vector. So
Yep. So this is going to be some really fun experimentation with search results. Like the way that what really makes me happy when I do stuff for the community is not just to do something that's technically cool, but to do it in a way that's really light and fast and easy to
mm,
integrate. That's where
that's the
most of the
move.
work for like FM log and FM search results went. So that you can integrate it in an hour and then it just works, you know? Anyway, so that's my goal.
Amazing. Well, so you're speaking at a conference this fall in Europe somewhere.
Yeah, two of them. So October
Two of
in
them.
Rome, November in Sweden, I think.
And these are the
Malmo.
ones that you're going to show in your presentation.
Yeah. So I'll be talking about this. And I'm also doing classes. Like the day before the conference, I'm going to be doing a paid class you
Oh
can
yeah,
pay
that's
for
right.
and come
That's
to.
right. You should
Uh,
put that in the show notes,
yep.
by the way.
Yep.
And a quick couple plugs, and then I'll just end with like a little 2-minute
Yeah,
presentation here.
we have two updates from you, really. The
Yeah, so
the Claristotle Learning Initiative and also your Intuition V3, which I
yes,
test.
so Claristotle, which is what the Claris AI Learning Initiative, we somewhat tongue in cheek, but I think in a fun
We,
way, named it
you.
Claristotle. Okay, whatever. That was a shower thought. I was just like, what should I? Oh my God,
Yeah.
Claristotle. So um on
You used to live right
July
over there.
yeah. On July 12th, we're having a follow-up. If you look in the show notes, you can join the Discord channel where we have active conversations about it. You can see our initial
Mm-hmm.
kickoff that we did last month and see a lot of the conversation that everybody's having. People are already registering for the July 12th, 8 a.m. Pacific
Mm-hmm.
Standard Time meeting. It's open to anybody that wants to come and talk about it. Mostly what we're going to talk about is, did anything that Apple announced, and our Claire's friends will be there
Mm-hmm.
too. They've been very
Mm-hmm.
supportive about this. Is there anything that we could use in this initiative there? And there'll be some Claire's folks there to provide their thoughts on how this might work. And really, we just want to keep the conversation going. So I strongly encourage people to check it out. Go to the show notes.
Mm-hmm.
It's on the community. We've been talking about just Claristotle. There's no other term.
Yeah.
Anywhere you look for it, you'll find the Discord information.
Yeah.
That's part one.
Got it.
Part
Well,
two
actually,
is I'm
before you go to the part two, when are we going to see a proof of concept of that we can start playing with?
Well, so thank you for that. That's an important question because what we're actually trying to create with this is first step is to create a community-driven knowledge base of a higher level of Claris related, FileMaker related knowledge than the latent
Mm-hmm.
intelligence that's in the model. We have to do that first. And so we're talking about doing that as a knowledge base that we can then go vectorize and make it available to different models. So once that knowledge base is there, and once we have the ability for people to take their own models or their own applications or whatever to go have access to that knowledge and then to embellish the latent knowledge within the models, there'll be all sorts of products that are coming out of that are going to be really amazing. So, and that's part of what we need to talk about too, is like, because we're not really talking about building a model or training a model. We're talking about building a knowledge base. And then what happens after that will
Right.
be very interesting to see what we do with it.
Yeah.
Maybe
How
someday
people
we
use it.
fine tune with it, but right now it's a knowledge base for vector retrieval.
Yep.
That's step one.
Right.
For me, in addition to the Claristotle on July 12th, I am really excited because I'm speaking at a conference in my hometown of Milwaukee next week as we record this. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and one of the things that was there my whole life is this thing called Summerfest, which is like a music festival, and it's a big deal in my little town. And a few years ago, they started a tech version of it. They're in partnership with South by Southwest. If you remember, South by
Mm-hmm.
Southwest was a music festival, then it
Mm-hmm.
became a movie and tech one. They're trying to follow in the same footsteps at the scale of Milwaukee. And I'm so proud to be able to go to my hometown and talk about AI. I'm doing a refresh, a very significant refresh of the session that I did at Engage, where I was just profiling a bunch of real world deployed AI things. Only a few of those I'm showing again, and I have a whole new set. I have a whole new hour, kind of as like comedians talk about. I have tons of content and a bunch of stuff
Mm-hmm.
that we've been doing since then. And one of those things that I'm going to profile, not all of them, but one of them is this intuition platform. We just released version 3. What the users on YouTube are looking at are custom chatbots. So we have an entire execution environment. This is like code interpreter for you know, the code, ChatGPT has code
Hmm.
interpreter, which is where you're not just chatting, but you're doing visualizations and Python. So we have over 480 Python libraries available built into this application. You can obviously do chats, you can do visualizations. And the biggest deal is it's multi-user, totally secure, meaning every user gets their own user persona.
Hmm.
All that modeling that I talked about from a user standpoint is happening. Full customization. These are just the prompt template builder that you just saw fly by very
Yeah.
quickly there. But the point is, it's all connected to your live data sources. So unlike with Code Interpreter, where you have to
Hmm.
upload a spreadsheet
Yep.
to be able to interact with it, we're connected to, like right now, what you're looking at is somebody connecting to their entire FileMaker suite
Hmm.
of applications through DAPI in this case, right? So
Hmm.
what we're able to do is containerize this and drop this into people's work environments and allow them to keep all their workflows the same. We're not introducing new stuff that you have, a new app that you have to work with or anything. You can actually build this functionality right into your existing FileMaker systems, your SQL systems. You have access to API data,
Damn.
all multi-user, all totally secure, SOC 2 compliant, ISO compliant. All the security checkboxes are checked, and model hot swapping. We were able to add the GPT-4 Omni within 45 minutes of its release with this, and so that meant, and then we pushed that out to all of our customers that are using this as an environment.
Hmm.
Um, and the way to think of it, when I say environment and execution environment, think of it as it's a operating system that you can run apps on, right? So we all know operating systems, we all know apps. Ours are an environment that you run assistants on. So we're looking at a training assistant that a user is connected to an actual FileMaker database with a bunch of FileMaker data, and they were able to ask, give me a chart that shows the progression of training, and give me all the sessions completed by certain individuals. Like this was all, and then you don't have to say
Hmm.
you want a chart even. You can just say, go find this data and present it to me in the most compelling manner possible. This is our
Wow.
version 3. Super excited about it. This can be deployed in the browser assistants that we're showing on YouTube, or like we're doing a deployment for inside Zoom chat. We've done one in Teams. You can do one inside Slack. You can do it inside your FileMaker application. You don't even have to touch your
Hmm.
workflows to be able to do this. So I'm super excited about it. And I'm also excited to be talking at that conference next week too, just because I'll be, you know, staying at my folks' house and
Yep.
being able to speak at a conference at the same time, which
Yep.
is just
For
crazy.
sure.
So just from
Yeah.
a personal worlds collide thing. So
Going home is always
more to
lovely.
come on that in the future. iSolutionsAI.com/intuition. Also in the show notes. I'm happy to chat with people about it if they're curious, but a lot of it on LinkedIn as well.
Sweet.
We
We
did
did
it.
it.
So
In perfect
we'll be
unison.
back.
Two
Maybe not
weeks.
in a couple weeks, just because the 4th of July,
Ah,
we don't know if people put us in yours, but right after that, we'll be back with another fun episode
yep.
of Claris Talk.
And AI information overload. All right. Thank
We
you, sir, as
appreciate
always.
everybody checking in. Yeah, absolutely, man. I enjoy these and I look forward to talking to you very soon.